Pamela Aaralyn. I'm a clear conduit channel and medium. I see energy. I see into the ether. I've been doing that since age 5. You can find me at aurareader.com. And I'm going to let Candace introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her work.
Well, hi, everyone, and thanks again, Pamela, for inviting me today. It's an amazing opportunity, and I love spending time with you, either with others like this or just when we've had the blessing to be able to spend some one-on-one time together. That's been amazing as well. Well, let's see. Primarily, I do the work of Dolores Cannon. I worked alongside and with her for many years, ever since I took her class in 2008. And when I went to take her class, I was working as an artist and photographer at the time. I had a strong interest in this work, but I didn't step into the realm of actually, working with other people or being out there with it until I met her. But everything changed when I met her. As a matter of fact, the magic happened before then, and I just ended up in Dolores' presence, and then everything blossomed, and everything's been amazing. And Dolores passed in October of 2014. And interestingly enough, my relationship with her has only broadened, deepened, and blossomed even more. So this topic of the afterlife, not only does it, of course, completely align with Dolores Cannon's work, which is basically past life regression. It's now called quantum healing hypnosis, but I still like it. I like the old name. I'm old-fashioned. Dolores Cannon's method, really it speaks to this, because it all was created by her, around her, surrounding her. But Dolores Cannon's method of accessing knowledge through the consciousness of a client while they are in a deep hypnotic state. And that has, it started out just past lives, and then things just opened up from there. And I've said from the beginning, and as I'm getting ready to say this, I'm already getting goosebumps, which is, it's just the beginning. We're just scratching the beginning of the kind of work that we can do in this state. Dolores, I believe one of the reasons she passed when she did was to assist us from the other side in understanding how to broaden and deepen this work. And it is actually happening, and it's happening in my own life. And Pamela, if you'll allow me to tell you about my night last night, it was so extraordinary. Well, so not since I was just after Hurricane Katrina. I'm going to go back then to just say this. I happened to be in Louisiana just 2 weeks after Hurricane Katrina back in, gosh, I'm not even remember the exact year, so I'm not going to say it. But the devastation was amazing, and I was headed to the Louisiana State Penitentiary, if you can believe that or not, as a professional horse photographer. And long story short, I stayed in an antebellum home not far from the penitentiary, and I was going there because they had this rodeo, and the inmates there work with some of the horses and the animals there, kind of as, well, a distraction, I imagine, and they also performed and put on a show for the public. And there's a lot of controversy around that. I haven't heard about it for years, but I was so interested in going there. But I stayed in this little antebellum home, a little bed and breakfast. And not since that visit, which was, there were so many spirits in that home that I didn't sleep ever. I mean, I was there for several days, and the spirits were all around me. And I mean, this isn't normal for me, meaning over my life, yes, I've had interaction, but I'm nothing like you, not a daily thing, not a weekly thing, just kind of, on occasion. Not since back then when I went days without sleeping because of the activity around me, did I have a night like I did last night. And I think it's because we were getting ready to do this show. And so it worked something like this. I'm actually having, it was hard to go to sleep. I finally did. I was dreaming about, and I don't know who this was, but there was a woman, maybe it was you, I don't know. There was a woman, and she was talking about speaking with spirits, and she was showing people. It was kind of almost like watching a screen or a TV show. She was being an instructor, and she had a string wrapped around her index finger, like a piece of twine, maybe. And she was using this finger to point where there was different energetic presences. And she was like basically teaching others about this. And I was fascinated, and I was seeing the swirling energy and the sometimes some mist and some other things. And I'm just watching this. I'm part of the group that's learning. And I'm fascinated by all this. And all of a sudden, bang, there's a great big crash. And what happens is I woke up from my dream because something crashed in my house. And I sat up, and it was very dark. And I knew something had crashed. I knew I'd been dreaming. And I just sat up a little bit. And here's the interesting part. My dream didn't stop. My dream just overlaid on top of me waking up. And all of the spirits that she was pointing out were still in my room. And I turned on my light too. I mean, I was like, am I still asleep or what's going on? I turned on my bedside light, and they're all still there, which is, again, not normal for me. And I was just fascinated. I was kind of watching basically movements of energy, and I knew they were, beings, of some kind, not very clear to me, but certainly there and all over the place. And then that kind of faded, and I got up to see what had happened. And my daughter had made a painting, a beautiful painting of Metatron's cube. And that is what fell in the other room. So I think Metatron had something to do with this. So that hit the floor, and I was looking at what that was all about. And I was quite awake, so I let the dogs out, and I opened up the computer more than anything just to see what time it was. And a Facebook message happened to come up with a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, Kathleen McGowan, who has a page called, and you all out there might be interested in this, Love Conquers Death. And she is very fascinated with all of this about after-death communication, particularly because her late husband is still communicating with her. So there's this post that she posted that I'm reading, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm supposed to be reading this. And she talks about introducing a friend of hers who had just published a book on orbs that she believes were after-death communication from her late son. And I thought, that's really interesting. This is all coming together. And then I sent that gal a quick message because I said, you and I ought to connect. And when I looked up at the time to see when I was sending this message, it was 3:33 a.m. And I sent that off, and I stayed up for a while because I was wide awake going, wow, this is amazing. So I think this is an auspicious day, and that's kind of a long-winded introduction, but I think it speaks to how things are opening and expanding for all of us, because my night last night, even though I do regressions with clients, and we do find out about a lot of things, what happens to them in their lives when they pass, what happens, their loved ones come in and sometimes give the story, and there's lots we can talk about there. But I think my evening speaks to the fact that when we say the veil is thinning, it's thinning for all of us. So whereas you, Pamela, may have had a night like I had last night more often, wow, I haven't had one of those in years, that full and with those many layers of things going on and obvious. I mean, it was like a party in my house last night. So I think that's happening for all of us. When you start having the intention or opening up to the understanding, it shows itself to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the work you do, and you didn't know this prior to meeting with me, but we do share some clients. And they come back to me and they're like, this is the best one. Like, they're really, really loyal. And they're like, this is the one that you need to be sending people to. This is the one that can actually get people into the somnambulistic state very, very well and keep them there. Like, this is, you know, a very, very, very good quantum healing hypnotherapist. So you come very highly recommended by my people. And you caught my attention right away, you know.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated because we share a great love for Dolores Cannon, which is interesting to me because when I first met Dolores Cannon, I, as a medium, went to her shortly after her death, and I am one of the channels that'll wait a little while before channeling someone. I'm not going to jump on that right away. Like, I'll give them some time in case they want to go to the resting place, you know. So I gave her a little time, you know, and then I think it was about a year later, and my group started asking me to channel her, and something like that, 6 months or a year later, and I said, okay, I'll ask, but I don't think she's into channels. I don't think she's into mediums, but I got a sense she's going to say no, but I'll do it. I don't know anything about her work, and at that time I didn't. And I thought, well, looks, every one of you keeps saying that our work is similar, so I'm going to ask her and say, hey, our work is similar. And I tried to talk to her, and she said no. And she said, it's interesting that you know, you seem like you can hear me and contact me, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get my messages right. And she was really clear. And she was like, that doesn't mean that you understand my work. Go understand my work and come back to me. And I'm like, oh. So I didn't go do my homework, but I didn't do what she said because I'm stubborn like that. And I like to keep my channels clear. I don't read a lot. I don't study a lot because I don't want my filter to be permeated. So I came back to her and I said, hey, sorry that I didn't do what you asked me to do, with all due respect, but here's why I didn't. And she goes, oh, you again. And I said, okay, will you consider at least looking at my process? Look at Aura Alchemy. People are telling me that it is similar. Is it? And she goes, I don't know, what do you do? And I said, well, just come on into one of my sessions with someone, and I'll let them know that you're there and that you want to observe, and if we get permission, you can just observe. So she did, and she had a hard time being quiet during it. She was like, what? You are...
That's Dolores.
She had a hard time being quiet during the session when she first started observing me, and she was standing in the background, and I was doing my Aura Alchemy process, and she goes, wait a minute. You're getting stuff done from theta? and I said, yeah. And I didn't really know what that meant because I don't understand theta either, you know, and I'm like, I don't know. I just know that there's different levels of the subconscious that you can work with. It's not just the somnambulistic state. And she goes, well, yes, I know that at this point. But what's really, really fascinating to me is that people are coming in and out of that state with you. You know, they're going into somnambulistic state, and then they're going up one, and then down one, and then up one, and they are traveling between these states of existences and still healing, and still they're under. You still have them under, and they're coming in and out. How are you doing that? So she and I started talking, and I said, well, it's alchemy. You have to combine sound and light. And she said, oh, father and mother, sound and light, black and white, you know, and you're doing this in a parallel way. You're combining the omniverse, is what she said to me, and I went, you know, because I didn't really understand what she meant. I don't understand a lot of what she says still. And she goes, this is the omniverse. You're working in the omniverse, and you're working in different dimensions, and they're overlapping, and you're operating in parallel realities. And I went, okay, now I understand you. You know, now you're talking my words, you know. And we just kept working together. And then one day she sent you. And she was standing above me, and you sent me a message and introduced yourself. And she goes, you need to talk to that one. And I said, oh, I have a sense about that one. And she's going to be hard to talk to. You better keep sending her back. And she goes, oh, I'll send someone else to make sure that she talks to you. And then she sent me Michelle Walling. And it was only like a week apart that both of you randomly came to me. You know, and I had been following Michelle's work for a while, but I didn't know you. And I kept being pulled, and I'm like, she's going to think I'm nuts. And she's like, no, she won't. You need to tell her what you're sensing. She will listen to you. And I'm like, no, really, she won't. I've read this person's life. She's not going to listen to me. she's just, yeah, you know, and she said, yeah, well, but she will, because you're authentic. So I kind of kept trying with you. I'm kind of like, okay, there's something interesting about this woman. I'm going to keep trying. And I was so honored when finally I could make that more personal connection and really get to know you and really start to dig deeper into what you're here to do and try to really connect with you and get you into your purpose. And then I started to watch you just flourish. I started to watch your mediumship abilities just catch on fire, you know? And then she started talking to you more, and then she started talking to me more. And she goes, yeah, I wasn't going to talk to you without her there. And I'm like, oh, okay. And this is just her. I mean, for those of you who knew her when she was in human form, this is just how she talks. She's completely forward and doesn't, no holds barred, right? Completely authentic.
Very often not politically correct. Very blunt.
That. Yeah. Yeah. So when you were telling me about your experience with Metatron, I want to let you know that that is your dominant one. That's your dude. That's your dominant archangel. Yeah, but that wasn't, he didn't make that fall. There was a cat that one of your cat's energies did. But I feel like those things are synchronous.
I only had one cat. She was under my arm. All the other cats were put up and nowhere near that painting. So that's pretty interesting, because when the painting hit the ground, the cat that was in my arm jumped up. So, but I still think it might be that, because I've got another cat in another room who's healing from a severe injury, and there might be something going on there. I'd like to speak just briefly, especially for those who are listening right now, about Dolores a little bit and what she used to say. You know, again, I was so blessed. I was so incredibly blessed. I took my class with her in 2008, and I came from none of the background. Didn't have hypnosis training, nothing. I was just interested. And I was, long story short, I was very blessed to be the person in her class who she did the demonstration a regression on, and everything changed from that. And then everything changed after the fact that she allowed me to create a group to support her practitioners. And at first it was just a few of us coming together and asking ourselves questions, but then it blossomed. And the more experience we got, the more Dolores began to speak with us. And then it was a few years after that, she actually invited me into her classes to, at first I was just handing out papers and sitting in the back, but I quickly, ended up being part of the classes in the way that I would help, answer questions, or we did mock sessions or things like that. And I did that until her death, and shortly after her death for a little while. But Dolores would say, because a lot of people would say things in classes and at events, they would talk about, and all kinds of channelers, and that there's a lot of them out there these days, a lot of them on the internet. And Dolores didn't have much use for channelers. She didn't have a great opinion of them. And I'm sorry for those of you out there, but I really didn't either. I mean, I didn't disrespect, but I was just very much, I didn't listen, I didn't fawn, I didn't gain a lot from listening to any of it. Sometimes I would read, but I just kind of would shrug my shoulders and I'd go on with my own work. And I wasn't real sure how all that worked. And I know everything comes through a filter, even in our regression sessions, all information comes through a filter. And it wasn't that I didn't believe people weren't channeling something. I just didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But Dolores herself used to say, she was so cute, she used to say, I'm never going to let anyone channel me when I die. I mean, I heard her say that probably 20 times, all the years that I've ever heard her, and she would laugh when she would say it. And a few months after she died, even before she died, quite frankly, I would hear her in my head. I think she was prepping me even before. I would hear her in my head, and I didn't really think too much about it, but then I finally started accepting it. And I started writing things down, and I started asking questions, and I started having her verify, Dolores, if this is really you, explain these things to me and show me and help me understand that this is really you. And one of the things I used to say over and over again, or one of the questions I used to ask is, Dolores, you used to say you would never let anyone channel you. Isn't that what's happening here? I am hearing what you're saying. I am writing it down. I'm not really sharing too much of it yet, but a little bit. sometimes in my dreams, but a lot of times in the mornings I hear her best. And here's what she says to me over and over again. She says, "You aren't channeling me, you're listening to me." Now, she made a great distinction between those two things. And for her, she did that in her real life too. There would be common ideas about, name it, whatever, even the title or the label somnambulistic. Her definition was different than most hypnotherapists' definition of that state. And even on the other side, she has a different definition of what she's doing here than maybe channeling. And I know you use the term because, of course, it's well known. But she made a great distinction of that, and she did for you as well, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. She made a distinction because she said you as a medium are listening and then repeating back what I'm saying. That's mediumship. But when you channel and I come through the body, I don't really want to do that. She wouldn't let me trans-channel with her. She wouldn't want to even come in at all, in trans-channeling or trans-channeling. She didn't want to have anything to do with letting me be the mouthpiece. She just always wanted me to repeat back what she's saying. So she would only talk in a mediumship format.
Just fascinating. That if there's anything that proves to my mind, and maybe the viewers out there will take a little bit of comfort in that, is when you move to the next, realm of existence, you definitely take your personality with you. It's not like you suddenly are all knowing and angelic and godlike or whatever. I mean, your personality goes with you, and it has absolutely happened with Dolores.
Yeah. And someone's asking in chat right now if mediumship is listening, channeling is when spirit comes through. Yes, but no. Spirit's coming through regardless, or I would not be able to repeat what she's saying, but I'm just repeating it word for word when I channel. That's mediumship. There's a difference between mediumship, listening and repeating back what they're saying, and then channeling where I'm getting out of the way. Like mediumship still has the filter. It's my human filter because I still, in my words, have to repeat back what she's saying. But in channeling, I'm not really, especially trance channeling, I'm not there. If those of you have seen me trance channel, I'm not there at all. There is no filter. It's strictly that being coming through. I've done that with Yeshua, a time or two. And then in trans channeling, which is a different form, that's TRANS channeling, which actually means with. Trans channeling means with. So what's happening in trans channeling is that they are stepping in and out. Stepping in and out. She has only done that with me a couple of times, and only to correct me. Only when I really wasn't hearing her, she'd step in and be like, "I said this." And she holds her finger up. And I'm like, oh, I got really bossy there for a minute. And the people in front of me, some friends were around me, and they're like, "Okay." And then she went right back, out. So yeah, that's the difference between the three. Are you ready to start taking some questions from our viewers, Candace?
Sure, absolutely.
Let's take a peek at what we got here. This is an interesting one. So, right, for those of you who are wondering, we put the questions above our heads. You can see them up here on the screen. The question is, can we visit this realm? I'm assuming you mean this realm being like the spirit world in general, fourth dimensional aspects, without dying, and how can I better connect with my daughter? I would love to see and hear her. I see her in my dreams, but she doesn't speak. I feel her at times and see the signs, but very much need to hear her and hold her. Oh, you touched my heart. What do you think about that, Candace? What's your perspective on that question?
Well, for everybody on all of these questions, Pamela has a broad, rich mediumship sort of background. So again, my background is primarily regression-based, although I've had many, many dreams. After-death communication during dreams is my biggest history personally. But when I have clients, I have many grieving clients, who come to me, and a lot of their focus of their lives are on loved ones who've passed. And they absolutely do come through in regression. They can come through directly. I guess, trans is one way of putting it that way, or they can appear outside of, the experience of the person who's in trance and absolutely communicate. I've had that happen more than one time in a regression. And here's another interesting thing. It's, what we do is, it's got to be similar. It's somehow it's turning on, it's turning on the realm or the the communication world of some kind. But I had a brother who died at 28 years ago, 27 years ago, long time. My dear brother Randy. And interestingly enough, more than once in a regression where I'm having a session with a client, and especially when they're interested in loved ones in the afterlife, my brother has come through to assist or say something in the session while that person is having their own conversation with their loved one. So it's all very, very fascinating. So yes, in a regression, you can absolutely face and meet your loved one in that way. Dreams are an excellent place to do that. It sounds like you're already doing that in your dreams, Babs. I'm not sure why she doesn't speak. I don't know if that's, from your side or from her side. Pamela may have something to say about that. I know that intention, though, is so important. And when you think about that and you imagine that and have that be some of the last thoughts you have as you are slipping into theta, in the theta brainwave state, which is that sliver of consciousness right before you go to sleep in the delta brainwave state, that's like, that's a recipe. That's like putting something into an oven to be created. And if you can hold that intention as you're falling asleep consistently for a while, I bet you'll be able to hold her and speak with her more clearly. What do you think, Pamela?
Yes, absolutely. The theta is the hypnagogic state that I speak of so often when I teach you guys in our mediumship classes, to set your intention. You don't have to meditate to do that. You can, and you can get into the same state from meditation, but it's a little bit more difficult if you don't meditate regularly and you're not used to coming in through it from meditation. Because it's easy to wake up out of meditation. Very easy for any little reason. But when you're going to sleep, the only thing you have to do is set a clear, easy to repeat intention. So in this state, and also I really highly recommend that you invoke the I am. The I am is so powerful in everything that you do, whether you're conscious or whether you're going into theta. The I am is going to connect you to what you want to do, both in both states. Alpha, beta, theta is going to connect you in every state that you operate and exist within. So you would just say, I invoke the I am in me to connect with my daughter and to remember. I put that and to remember part because I was having a hard time, because I would visit so many different people and I'm so busy astrally that I'm like, okay, I don't know what I just did, but it felt like 1,000 lifetimes and now I just need to get up and deal with my life. So, as you guys know, I'm pretty avid in the astral realms, do a lot of healing on people that I love there. And normally, whichever one I healed last, whichever one of you I worked with last, I'll remember, but the rest I'll forget. So it's very, very important to add that, in the final stages of that invocation. And you just say it over and over again. You just make it quick and efficient and to the point and simple so that you can remember the invocation, and that is your intention. So basically, you would just say, I invoke the I am in me to connect with my daughter and to remember. And you can make it much more specific, too. I started out with basic intentions in order to work in the astral realms, but the more specific I got, the more I noticed that I would get a lot more done and I would remember a lot more. I had no particular curiosity. People find that interesting, but it's very true with channels and mediums that we don't have curiosity because everything that exists is already at our fingertips, and a lot of times we're just like, we don't even care to know. We just want to go watch some stupid TV. So I basically don't have any. I was telling someone this right before this podcast. She's like, "Why don't you ever ask why?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm like, because when I want to know, it'll come to me." So if you ask why during your attention in a very specific way, for instance, when I started wanting to learn the names of my spirit guides, which I did not know until age 39 because for some reason I didn't care. And I just said my intention, I invoke the I am to connect with my spirit guides and to receive their names. So that didn't work. There was too many. I got like 100 names and I woke up writing everything down going, did I even get any of that right? So I got more specific. This is trial and error. At that point, I went to bed the next night and I said, I invoke the I am in me to remember the name of my dominant spirit guide. So I just said it over and over and over again, and you just let yourself fall asleep during these invocations. Just say them and say them and say them and say them and say them. This has to be redundant. Make them quick enough so that you're going to remember, efficient enough so that you're not going to forget, and you're just going to slip into theta, with that intention, exactly as Candace was describing it. But insofar as safely visiting this realm without dying, I'm curious. No, you don't say it aloud. You say it in your mind, because otherwise your consciousness would stay where it is. That's very important for you guys to know. If you speak as you're going into deeper states, it wakes you up. I tell people this during regressions as well. If I ask you to repeat something during a regression, I'm going to be cautious to let you know that I mean in your mind, not out loud, because that will wake you up. Speaking will. So how you safely visit the realm without dying. I'm curious why you think you're going to die. Where does that come from? Because this could be your actual concern, is that I know you see and hear spirits because I know you personally. But when it comes to your daughter, and this was the same thing with my dad, and this is the same thing with many of you who are trying to connect with people personally, the closer you are, the harder it is because your emotions are involved and you need to grieve. Grief is a very important stage of the healing process that can connect you to your loved ones right away. Grief is a big, giant, etheric wall between you and them. They don't mean it to be that way, but literally it zips their mouth. If you have grief, that energy is a density that carries its way through the astral realms. They're not trying to be cruel, okay? It's not that. It's just like putting a dense wall of energy between yourself and them, and then you cannot travel to the same area of the ether that they are. Much like when you go to a children's playground and you see those little microphones, one is at one end of the playground and one is at the other. For those of you who have kids, you know what I'm talking about. And the kid will go and speak into one, and then the other kid can go. But if you watch them, the other kid, when they're trying to listen, if they don't put their ear right up to it, then they're not going to hear it. They have to figure out how to connect with that loved one on the other side of the playground. It's the same in the fourth dimension. It's the same in many dimensions. Grief makes you kind of be in the position of the kid who's holding their ear too far back from the microphone. There's a density there. You can't hear her, so why should she speak? She knows you're not going to hear her. So get closer to your own heart center. Grieve her. I know you think you have. I personally think you haven't. That's me calling you out. You know I love you. So there you go. But yeah, that's amazing. Do you have anything else to say in that regard, Candace?
Such great points that you're making, which is, often why, it's usually that there's a time frame after. Of course, I have no idea about the details of Babs and her daughter, but there's a time frame where, there's probably not going to be any communication for exactly some of the reasons that you're talking about. And I find that in regressions, it can be one of both ways, meaning the person can still carry so much grief or carry their conscious mind into a regression that I love the way you described this. This is really helpful for me in my own work too. They're still not going to make the connection because the grief is too fresh, it's too big, it's too prominent in their life. But sometimes if they are able to sink into a possibly theta or whatever state it is. Sometimes I really wish I had electrodes on people's brains so I could make notes about when things are happening, what's going on. And I think we may be getting there at some point, although who wants to be that technical? But at some point, sometimes when you have a facilitator like that, you are able to step out of your normal energetic place, which may hold a lot of that grief, into a more expanded place where you're not burdened by it. And so that's when sometimes having a regression really works for these kinds of things, where you really can make a connection because you are slipping into a different energetic realm with an intention to do that, and you kind of set your grief aside. And to be quite frank, when most people, wake up, they kind of go back to that heaviness and that denseness and that grief. But both with the dream state, both with having somebody assist you as a mediumship and regression, sometimes that can be lessened or thinned or set aside briefly for communication. So brilliantly stated, Pamela.
It absolutely can. This is why I love quantum healing hypnosis, because it pulls you into a state that can permeate the density of that grief, for a while, for a long while. Yep. And you can actually just step. It's very loving. I feel very safe when I can pull myself into that state really easy as a trance channel. And I feel just love. For those of you who watched my trance channeling Yeshua video, I just felt love. I didn't feel grief. I've talked to my dad in that state, and I didn't cry when I saw him. I just felt like, oh my gosh, come hug me, because I had a great relationship with my dad too. So you don't really bring in your traumas as much during that state. And the moment you do, you kind of go up to a higher state and you can heal in that state. So, and then go back down. That's in my work anyway. I don't know if that's similar because I'm not trained in quantum healing hypnosis, but in my work, you can go up, into a little bit of a higher level of subconscious to heal that grief while you're still regressed. So it's very helpful. Is it the same in quantum healing hypnosis?
It's so individualized. It really, you as a facilitator using this method, there's so many levels of things that are going on. I've been doing this work now for 8 years, and I am continually learning about how things are working and how things are helping, and how, one of the interesting things that happens is that the facilitator brings an energy, the client brings an energy. Those two things together create this, this platform or this canvas for something to happen, and some very interesting things happen there. It's different for everybody is basically what I'm going to say. Some people are far more successful than others. It absolutely is possible. So much is possible doing this work like this. But we never make any guarantees, because who knows, who knows? And some people are able to move up and down and in and out smoothly through these different states. And other people, are more sticky, and they just, they need more practice, or they're not there yet, or it's too soon. I mean, who knows? It's hard to answer that question in a, in a blanket kind of way, but it's certainly possible. And I've seen glorious, absolutely glorious reunions in regressions, particularly when there's been things like, oh my goodness, again, goosebumps thinking about it, when somebody had been maybe the driver of an accident where somebody else passed away in the car, and they, finally able to talk about that, or a mother and a child where, something traumatic happened, and it happened so fast. There's been, quite significant healing in a very short period of time. And sometimes, very frankly, the client just can't let that grief go, even in this process. They just can't, or they're not ready. And tell me if you feel this way, or if you think this, Pamela. Sometimes I think people think, you tell me, that if they're able to lessen the grief or set the grief aside, somehow that means you didn't love that person. You know what I mean? Some people, I think that if I'm happy, if I let the grief subside a little bit, then my loved one won't think that I miss them or love them. And I think I don't know if that's societal, I don't know if it's human, and maybe a combination of both of those things or more. But sometimes people hold on to the grief thinking it's like a way to express their love.
I agree. And what I've noticed also is that many people hold death traumas and family traumas, the trauma of what the family experienced. They're not ready to let it go because they haven't grieved especially during unexpected deaths and quick deaths and things where you know or you think you know that that person wasn't ready to go. That's really, really difficult. And that particular density of that grief makes it hard, but also people with strong core beliefs that relate to guilt over perhaps not taking care of a loved one as much as they wanted to. Maybe they lived on the other side of the country. That was the same with me. I couldn't get to my dad in time. By the time I found out, he was found unresponsive in his home. And by the time I found out, I was coming from Nevada all the way to South Carolina, which is clear across the country. I couldn't get on a plane because it happened during the basketball season of March Madness, and all the planes, people were coming in, and there was just no flights out, because people come into Vegas for that. And that's where I lived at the time. And I couldn't get a plane ticket out, so I had to drive for it's like 2.5 days to drive. And I showed up exactly at the time. He waited. I told him not to. I sat there and talked to him from the car as I was driving. I'm like, don't wait. It's okay. Don't wait. And he's like, no, you will prevent yourself from letting go. You will not grieve if I don't wait on you. I'm waiting for you. So he waited. They were saying he's not there. We don't know why. And my mom was calling me and she was saying he's not there. We don't feel like he's body, but he's not dying either, and we don't know what to do. And I'm like, he's waiting on me. And she's like, yeah, I know. So I showed up, and literally 5 minutes after I showed up, he was a little bit more responsive. He grabbed my hand and he opened his eyes, and as soon as he saw me, he stopped breathing. He let go, and he passed holding my hand. Yeah, and everyone knew that that's what he was waiting on, because I'm the baby girl, even though I'm the oldest in the family. I'm the baby girl, So he was waiting on me because he knew that I would not let go. And I thanked him. I'm like, okay, I get it. You're right. I would not have grieved it if you had not. I would have felt terrible. And that kind of scenario truly does cause people to have a deeper time even going into the somnambulistic state, because they don't even know what to expect. You don't know if the person's going to say, oh my gosh, you didn't show up for my death, or oh my gosh, you didn't take care of me well enough. People hold core beliefs of grief and shame that prevent them. It creates resistance, and it prevents them from, really facing what they need to face, So, all right.
Pamela,
go ahead.
I scrolled down. There's 40 questions just here. I mean, this is amazing. There's so many amazing questions.
I know. Let's take another one. Whenever I see myself on the other side, I always look just like myself, except that my hair is dark brown instead of red. I also still appear to be human, even though I am a starseed. Can our permanent form still be a human facade, even if we are not originally human? What do you think?
Okay, I'll come up with a Dolores answer for you, because this is an excellent question. For this show, I gave the question out to my own community, Dolores' original support forum for her practitioners, the one that's been going for 8 years now. And we got lots of great questions. There's so many questions we could talk into the night, Pamela, with all of these excellent questions. But one of the questions that I asked actually was a practitioner who's quite connected with Dolores, MJ Olinger, asked, can you describe your being on the other side? You're on the other side. Describe your being. Describe, and the answer basically was, well, let me show you how I am being when I'm speaking with you. And then there was an image, and it was a little bit like, it looked like Dolores. She was wearing one of her striped shirts that she liked wearing, and her pants, and kind of a blue-pink shirt thing that she had. And it was kind of like on Star Trek when they're in the transformer. It was a little bit of like this, a little bit of horizontal, a little bit, it was a little, human form, but not completely solid or whatever. And she was like, this, when I am focused on communicating with you, this is my form, because we are connecting, our energies are connecting, and this is the way it is. And that was interesting to me. And then, but I asked her, I said, but Dolores, do you have like a home base form, a neutral form, a form where, and then she showed me the most beautiful sphere, kind of like an orb, beautiful sphere. It had many levels, many layers, many components, and yet it was beautiful and spherical, and there was a lot of life. It reminded me of an orb, only, in 3 dimensions. And it was so beautiful. And I remember saying, Dolores, that's beautiful. You're beautiful. And she answered it by saying, that's what you look like too. So what I got from this, Charlotte, when you are on the other side, it depends on where your focus is, right? So when you are on the other side, however you're visiting there astrally through dreams or whatever, if your focus is more human based, it probably will tend to appear more human like. And I don't know about your hair. There's probably something personal going on in there. I don't know if you're a normal, natural redhead or what's going on there. What do you think, Pamela?
I agree with you that it is about the form that you choose from your perspective. For instance, for me, whenever I see myself on the other side, and the other side, just so many sides. It's such a broad term when there's so many different dimensions that I like to travel within. But depending upon the dimension that I want to travel in and that I choose to travel in, many people see me many different ways. A lot of people will say, we see you and you look exactly like yourself. And a lot of people will say, we see you, but there's a lot of pink and you kind of look angelic, and sometimes I see wings. I'm like, okay, that is a higher self version of me. I have an earth angel purpose. So that is my higher self that you're seeing. So that's like the original form of me. And if I'm coming in a healing and I'm healing, I generally will take that form because that's my purpose here. So a lot of people will see that form, so different people will see different forms of you based upon what your purpose is with them and their purpose is with you, and based upon what you can handle also. I've noticed that when I first started really astral traveling in a way where I even noticed myself, because I'm not very observant about how I look in astral form, truly, I just never pay attention, always looking at you guys, not looking at me. So one day, seriously, when I was like 39 years old, I'm 41 now, by the way, so this wasn't long ago, someone said, don't you just want to see what your higher self looks like? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. So I asked. I said, what do I look like? Because people always tell me that I look like me, or I look pink, or I look like an angel, or I look like this. And I wanted to really get to know another aspect of me that I had recently learned about. So I said, oh, show me that one. Show me Kali. Show me that aspect. Show me the Kali Ma aspect. So one of the guides that I travel with stood there and held a mirror, like a lengthy mirror in front of me. And I didn't know what that was going to be like. And I looked in it. And she goes, that's you. And I jumped. It didn't look like me at all. There was this blue being with like a ton of arms on each side, and she was carrying a spear, and she looked kind of badass. And I was like, ah, is she going to kill me? And they're like, well, I don't know. Do you want to kill you? And I was in spirit form that night in this way that I felt very protective of someone. So I happened to be showing up in that form because the negative entities that were around my loved one needed to be afraid of me. They needed to formulate a respect for me. So I chose that form because that's my spiritual warrior side. I have a form that shows up for people like that. I don't play when I'm in that form. Yeah, that's my avatar. Exactly. That's my avatar form. So you're going to see yourself based upon how you want to see yourself, what perspective of you are operating then at the time. And other people are going to see you based upon what they need to see for their healing. So I hope that makes sense. I'm talking too much again. Let's take another question. Okay, this is a good one. If you are a star seed here on Earth, when you die, do you go back to your life on another planet, or do you stay on the other side? What do you think?
You know, if there's anything that I would like to say from my own background and perspective on this subject as a whole, is how incredibly individualized and personal moving into the next realm can be. There are many aspects, many details that we find commonality in stories, near-death experiences, and other things like that. There are some things you can talk about, but it is just, once again, it's one of those things that's so individualized, it's so different, it's so personalized to you. You know, you can go back, if you are in whatever level, your higher self, and it's your plan, your larger plan to go back to the other planet, that's where you're going to go. But you may be done with incarnating on planets altogether. It kind of just depends. All kinds of things, you know, just depend. And one of the things that I'm taking, you know, it depends on what your goals really had been during this life. You know, have you achieved them? Are you ready to move on? Are you ready to rest? Like Pamela talked about the resting place. Dolores talked about the resting place. I have this story. Dolores, a friend of Dolores happened to hear, and I won't mention who said it, but somebody who quite connected, frankly, but said about Dolores that when she died, she was really confused and she didn't know where to go. And he, as somebody who moves in these realms, assisted her to go to where she belonged and all of that. And as I'm listening, I don't say any of this about myself. I don't do this kind of work. It just didn't sit right with me. I'm like, I don't know if I buy that or not. And I actually asked Dolores then in some of my own communication, Dolores, what exactly happened when you die? What exactly happened? And she described it. And that she also described it a little bit in terms of the way this person had said to me that she was a little confused and needed help. And she said, are you kidding me? I wasn't confused. I needed no help. I knew it was coming. She spent 45 years doing regression work with people who and went through tens of thousands of lives in that experience, wondering, of course, as she's helping her clients, what will happen to her when she goes? She was immersed in this. There was no confusion whatsoever. So for Dolores, she just like became this whooshing column of light. And she said it was kind of like a fire hydrant thing. And she knew that she could decide while she's like in this column, in this whooshing energy of, she could decide. She had enough presence. She could decide what she wanted. And she'd been planning for the longest time to go to the resting place. And that's where she went.
That's where she told me she went to. Yeah.
See, this is why I love you so much. Because Pamela and I, with Dolores, for those of you out there who also knew Dolores and knew that Dolores said those things about not channeling, when Pamela and I have come together to compare notes on what Dolores has said, we finish each other's sentences. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's just confirmation on so many different levels. It's just very apparent that she is sending information back this way and wanting us and others to share out there through regressions, through dreams, through listening, through mediumship. And so it's very personalized, Charlotte. You know, if you are interested in going to that other planet, if it's a soul goal, if it's you know, if you're meant to go there, that's where you'll go.
Yeah, and you will choose it. What I've noticed is you have what Christians call the life review. That I call that the spirit hangout. I have a much more of a looser term for that, but basically you do sit around with your ancestors, you know, with your spiritual family, your closest ones, your guardians, all the above in there, and they kind of go through what you did. And then they say, okay, before this, you were on this planet or you were in this star system and you also did that purpose there. You know, do you want to go back to Earth? Do you want to go back to your planet of origin? Do you want to stay in the resting space for a little while and then make this decision later? What do you choose? That is something that I find happens right away, is that people convene and have a choice, and they're told that they have a choice. I don't believe in forced reincarnation. That is something that I do need to share, that from what I've seen and noticed about watching people who transition on a daily basis, that stopped a long time ago. So that's not happening anymore. There's no false light. There's none of that. But there is some exceptions. The only exception is that if you believe that there is forced incarnation, if you believe and your fear is attached to that, you do carry that through. What happens is that your belief creates everything that happens after the afterlife. However, you also have these intermingling moments in between all those things where you still get a choice. So it's different for everyone, and I've noticed it just is such an individual experience. So I am going to take another question, and I'm going to, what is God's name? Yeah, we can go there.
Okay, so the question is, what is God's name? Well, there are many names, right? And names are this thing that humans have devised because we have speech, and we sometimes need to have the speech and these auditory sounds coming out of our mouth to identify and communicate. But you know, God's name is probably as infinite as God himself, itself, source itself is. On the other side, language is not normally needed. The vibration, the frequency is instantaneously communicated. There's really no need for any identifying names in that regard. Most of the names that you would be interested in are simply historical names that have been passed down. The one that I like very well is the and I'm not going to be able to say it, or I don't want to say it wrong, but it's Jonathan Goldman. If you all know this, no relation to me, Candace-Craw Goldman, but Jonathan Goldman is a sound healer, and he has a soundtrack out there called Holy Harmony. And in Holy Harmony, the ancient name of our human people, in a chorus of people chant the ancient name of God in the most beautiful way for an hour. And I actually play that soundtrack quite often before my sessions. So for me, that is, look up Holy Harmony and Jonathan Goldman and see if you don't resonate with that name. And for me, again, even the name itself, the consonants, the vowels that make up the name that is spoken there isn't as important. Look, I can't even really bring it up, and I don't want to say it wrong, but it's the feeling of the recognition and the song and the voice tones from the humans who are singing this that for me provides the beautiful name of God. And I might just go take another question. I think I can do that, right? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to take this question right here. This is from Jennifer. Jennifer says, I heard or learned years ago that when you hear someone coming through the veil to visit you, it's common to hear a loud crack or noise on your wall or window. Apparently, this is the sound of someone piercing the veil. This is a really great question, and I know that Pamela will have something to say about that. But I think that that's true. I think that can happen, but I think that it can become very varied, meaning this. I know when my brother passed back in 1989, he would ring the telephone. And I would answer the telephone over and over again, and no one would be there. But I know he was able to pierce the veil. And maybe he was trying to talk to me, but my grief was too hard. My grief was too strong. I couldn't hear anything. But the phone would ring, the phone would ring, the phone would ring, and Pamela's back. And that could be a way of doing it. I know that Dolores used to say she would get raps on the wall during sessions. So when the communication between those on one side of the veil or the other was about to happen, she would hear that. So I think that that's very often the case, is that you will hear or see something. Another thing that happens that isn't sound oriented is the light. Lights may blink on and off. It may be an electrical interference that will show that. So that can happen. And some other people in the chat room are saying that they hear knocks on the wall a lot. And what's fascinating is sometimes you can be in a place where some of that is happening and only some of the people around you can hear or see what's going on. In sessions, when I hear something or I see something, even lights blinking on and off, I actually ask my client, did you see that too? Because I want to make sure, because sometimes they can't see it. Most often, yes, but I ask the question, did you hear that? Did you see that? And they, I don't know if it's the electrical interference or not. I've even known some car alarms to go off or things like that. So there's definitely something that's being affected in the physical realm when those from the other side are communicating with you. I think Pamela's trying to come back up on the screen, but
all right, let's take another one. What dimension did we go to after we passed over? I would love to hear a quantum healing hypnosis perspective on this, Candace.
I may have to repeat myself here. Again, it's so individualized. What dimension is it? A lot of this is human labels. We use these words to try to help us understand all of these things that are going on. We use these words that, quite frankly, very often in a QHHT session, when we ask these questions, sometimes the information will come through. I just got an interesting one the other day about artificial intelligence and the 19th dimension, which was so specific. But we use these terms, these labels, but it's really a felt thing. It's really an energetic thing. It's we try to label it as something from our perspective, and it's so individualized. And I'm not sure I can answer that question. And if it is answered, it'll be answered in a human perspective. And then when you pass over, the answer won't make any sense. At least that's the way it works from my study, my experience. So I know we talk a lot about the third dimension and we're moving into the fifth dimension. And some of that is very helpful when we're talking about how we're changing things in our lives, in our world, etc. But the numbers or the labels, they really don't mean as much as the felt experience and the possibilities of creation, etc.
I completely agree. Yeah, I've noticed that it's very individual. When you see what people call ghosts, or spirits, or whatever the term, your light body, your vibration, that's that. And if you're not ready to go, there are various places, even within one dimension. That is called, many people in churches call that the spirit world. Many people in spiritual communities call that the fourth dimension. It is what it is, somewhere between third and fifth, just for definitive purposes so you understand. I noticed that if someone's not ready to go, if they feel that they're not ready to go, like if there was an accident or a trauma or things of that nature, they hang out there for a little while. If you are operating in the form of a spirit guide, sometimes you'll hang out there for a little while as well, if that person decides to guide your family. The lower astral realm, yes, that's one of those areas. That's where you're seeing those spirits. So I'd noticed that's, not as common as people think. So most of the time when I, as a medium, am speaking to spirits and light beings on the other side, they are not in that realm. They have already chosen a higher realm to move into. The lessons get learned very quickly, and time in different dimensions is very different. We have gravity. We have kind of a slow time thing going on. For instance, I can travel through astral travel with my light body to my home planet, which is the Hyades, by the way, that whole star cluster over there within the Lyran feline systems, and spend years there. And it will only be 8 hours of sleep. And I will wake up going, yeah, as a kid, this used to really freak me out. I'm like, I'm 50. No, wait, I'm 10? So time happens really, really quickly. And so many people will say, well, how could that person let me go? Well, if you just experience another 50 years, and then from that person's perspective, they're in the fifth dimension and they've already, they're with you. They're with you. There's no separation in death. How can they miss you? You know what I'm saying? They have just probably decided to have another lifetime with you. That happens in many times when I'm going through regressions and when I'm going through my process work and when we go into shamanistic journeys as well. They will meet their loved ones and the loved one will say, what are you talking about? You woke up with me this morning. Come let me hug you. And then their higher self steps in and says, okay, well, a fractal view's still on Earth, but a fractal view's here on the Pleiades with me as well. So welcome, human fractal, but your Pleiadian fractal is right here in my arms. So I hope that answered that question.
Very well.
Okay, let's take another one. Okay. I'm going to love to hear Candace's perspective on what happens when someone commits suicide.
Well, we humans have a history of pronouncing judgment on suicide, and it's unfortunate. Of course, it would seem logical that we wouldn't want to promote such a thing. It seems awful. But again, this, like everything, very, very individualized. It kind of depends. I've had many clients who've asked this question about loved ones or who have considered suicide themselves. So in a broader sense, if committing suicide, you are avoiding something that you're supposed to be figuring out, you're not going to solve your problem. You will have your problem presented back to you you have another choice of solving it again. So for anybody who might be thinking about that, if they have the capacity to have that kind of thought process before they start, suicide doesn't always fix your problem. As a matter of fact, it can compound your problem. You can, and I have had many regressions where, somebody has committed suicide or presented the same problem over and over and over again, didn't solve the problem or have the learning the way they wanted or their soul wanted, etc. So it was just, do-overs until a different answer or a different result had happened. That can be one thing that happens with suicide. Not always the case. Some people simply have already fulfilled their life's purpose and they are stopping the pain. And then there's not a repercussion. There's not you have to do it over and over and over again. Sometimes suicide in a human isn't about that person's life at all. It is about the people who surrounded them and the lessons that they will gain by having to deal with the after effect of a suicide. And believe it or not, everybody's higher self, at some point, even though your conscious mind might not know this, on some level, you were part of the understanding and the agreement of this event happening for that learning. As a matter of fact, your higher self on another level might be saying, I've never experienced somebody in my life committing suicide. I haven't done that one yet. Would you mind doing that? And, from that perspective, we as humans existing physically, consciously right now might go, oh my God, that's awful. Why would you ever do that? You really have to think about it like Shakespeare in the play. It's up on stage. That's the play. That's the thing that's going on up there. But when you're off the stage and you are the director and you are the producer and you're the actor and you're the writer and you're talking with all of the people who are producing what's going on that play, it's a much different perspective. You know, somebody's the villain, somebody's the one who dies. These are the things that happen, and this is all very interesting to us when we're off the stage and we're creating this thing up there. But even now, as we're doing this wonderful SpreeCast today, you know, we are in the play. You know, we're in the play, we're actors in the play, talking about what it's like, you know, when you're off the play and what's going on the play, which again is very interesting as well. So many things happen when there's a suicide, and a lot of healing usually comes into play, and a lot of the Dolores calls it the resting place. There's also the healing place. There's, you know, any number of things can happen there too. Again, it's very individualized.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's based upon many people in spiritual communities call this soul contracts. You call it pre-birth intentions. There are many different, you know, human definitions for it. But yeah, it's chosen on some level, you know, prior to your incarnated experience, in my opinion, from my perspective. And it's just Source operating through perspectives, and Source gets really, really bored. Source wants to learn more, and you are that Source. It's not anything being controlled. You're not being controlled. Source isn't punishing you. This isn't karma. This isn't for suffering or pain. You are that Source, and you are choosing perspectives that are more and more complicated, more and more difficult, because you are evolving. And if you evolve in a 3D duality, if you think about it, you know, for those of you who understand what starseeds are highly evolved beings who have been there, done that, and bought 1,000 spiritual t-shirts. Therefore, what better way to learn through Source perspective than to devolve, step into a third dimensional incarnated body full of density and suffering and traumas, in order to evolve again. There's no way for Source to evolve at a certain point in time other than to do these sort of things. There's no further evolution. So it really, really gets my goat when people say, oh, coming to Earth is just something that's, you know, this is not an evolved place, and we're not evolved beings, and there's so much crap here, and so much suffering, and so much this and that, therefore we cannot be evolved beings. I highly disagree.
Me too.
Highly disagree. We are evolved beings. Otherwise, we would not be here. That you have to go through a lot to get here. It is a pleasure to be here. I am honored to be here, and I will be that person that goes down if the ship sinks. I will be there, right there, waving my hands, going, yep, I volunteered. This is me. You know, people in my love life are like, yeah, you're nuts. I'm not coming back. And I'm like, okay, well, then I don't know what to tell you, because Earth will be different, and this is the last time that we're going to be in a third dimensional perspective, something you didn't expect me to say today. This is it, this lifetime.
In regressions, we have learned, I like using this analogy, if you are alive during this time, you like won Willy Wonka's golden ticket. I mean, you won the lottery even to be here. And for those of you who may have, and my heart breaks as I say this truly, if you've lost a child, if you've miscarried a child, if something has happened to somebody who is very, very young, please know that even that experience for that soul was brilliant and amazing and expansive for them. And some of these souls could only manage to be here for a very short period of time. That they get, if you think about it, they get credit for being here during this time. And it provides expansion for all of the loved ones, all of the family and everything. But to be here during this time is astounding. And to be here during this time in some sort of compromised position, by the way, a deformed or you know, body, or a handicapped or challenged body of some kind. Over and over again in regressions, I learned this. And over and over again in regressions, I have some people who the events in their lives are, you know, astounding. You know, event after trauma, after suffering. I mean, just a laundry list of awful things that have happened. And in some ways, I like to describe it as, these are the folks who are going down the triple black diamond ski slope, you know, And if they, they're trying to make this down here, standing up at the end, and they're like the Olympic champions, the ones who've had all of this stuff go on in their lives. And then there's the other side of that coin. And I don't have as many people who show up in my regressions who have, very ease-filled lives with nothing going on. Very few of us are like that, but there's some, there's some out there who have, a lot of, very easy and challenge less existence. And a lot of times the answer for that is, girl, you just needed a break. You needed to know what pleasure was on the planet, food and sex and, beautiful clothes. And your last 12 existences or whatever were, awful. And this is your breather and you're on vacay, so just enjoy it while you're here. The pleasures of the physical are intense, and the pain of the physical is intense. And you are so brave to be here, but you're also very, very lucky, and you are special. Make no mistake about it. If you are here, you are special.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I get so many different perspectives on that, because some of my clients come to me and they're like, really, this is it? I'm just here to, I'm going to have some kids and, tend to my animals, and then maybe have meetings with my family on Christmas and go for a walk in the park. I'm like, yeah, you want to talk about your other lifetimes where you had to, step into some really difficult stuff? You want to talk about that time when you were Hitler's advisor? Or do you want to talk about the time now where you just get to have your family and everyone's together and everything gets to be beautiful? And humans do this. Even in the spirit world, I've noticed when I meet humans in the spirit world, they're doing the same thing. They're like bored. They're very evolved. And they're like, yeah, but I gotta have a purpose. Sometimes your purpose is just love, joy, rest, peace. It happens. So enjoy it. Now here's the other perspective. I also get humans coming to me saying, I have had enough. I am done here. I am so done. I'm so sick of suffering. I just want peace. Those are the humans who have the purposes that peace. You got to understand, when you come here and you say from the spirit world, I want peace, I want unity, I want balance and equality, you're stepping in duality saying you want peace. You realize that within the shadow and the light, you got to get to the shadow first to be able to see the light, because you have to step into a frequency to get to the light. Therefore, the other side of peace is trauma. The other side of peace is war. The other side of peace is having a hard time. So if you told yourself you wanted peace, that's the same thing as when I was 5 years old and I said I was wanting to pray for patience. And someone said, don't do that. I'm not a patient person, by the way. Therefore, when I prayed for patience, I got all this stuff that made me have to be patient whether I like it or not. And I'm always being put in these very resistant relationships, very difficult relationships, difficult life circumstances. Everything's difficult, resistance, because I asked for patience. So cautious about what you ask for when you're on the other side. Remember this conversation today. But yeah, you are evolving. You really, really are. I have enjoyed this so much. We might have to make a part 2 and 3 and 4 because we have so many questions and I do have to go. I have to wind up, unfortunately. So, but I want Candace to come back. So if she agrees to it, we'll be doing this more.
This was so much fun. I know that so many of you have been talking about the Facebook questions and my community's questions, and there's 50 or more questions underneath us right now, and we only got to a handful today. Pamela, I would love to do this with you. I love spending time with you, and I love spending time with your community and answering. I learned a lot today myself, and you're just so joy-filled, and I'm energized after this time with you, and I would be blessed and very pleased to come back.
Yes, and can you tell our viewers how they can reach you for your quantum healing hypnosis?
Sure, and I know some people, by the way, I'll take this really quick question. Some people ask if it's done via Skype. Let me tell you that when she was alive, Dolores Cannon was adamant that regression sessions should not be done via Skype. I still believe that, although let me just throw out the tiny little tidbit that there's some talk about that in the ethers, but nothing right now about talking about offering such a thing. Those who offer Dolores Cannon's particular method over Skype is currently, under my opinion, going against the wishes of Dolores Cannon. There's other things you can do over Skype with people if you can't travel, but to do a proper, at this moment in 2016, coming into the summer, QHHT session, find a qualified practitioner in your area, and then do it that way. You can find me at newearthjourney.com, and I have a radio show on BBS Radio, and I'm also producing a show called Quantum Healing with Candace over with my great and wonderful friends, our mutual friends, Greg Prescott and Michelle Walling over at In5d.com. There's a lot going on. There's more to do and more to talk about than there is time in a day. And I know you've got a busy day with your kids and everything going on in your life. Thank you so much again, Pamela, for taking this time out of the day to spend with me and our wonderful guests.
I love you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Candace, for being here. Namaste.